When it comes to philosophy, Plato is one of the most iconic names. Like, pretty much everyone knows this name. If you are interested in philosophy, you at least know what he kind of invented. If not, you still most likely know this name. If not, you definitely know Socrates. Socrates will be one of the characters that will be featuring in book we'll be taking a look at. A book we'll be taking a look at today, called Hippias Major. So this is one of the writings by Plato, and this video should serve as a summary for the book. I'll try to summarize like everything that's in it. So theoretically, you don't have to read it, but I do recommend you have your own experience with the thing. You have your own interpretations, your own thought processes. But everything should be in this video. I still recommend reading it for yourself. Now, this dialogue would be called one of the aporia dialogues. Basically, what that means is that you kind of arrive at a dead end, and then you suddenly see that, oh, fuck, where do we go now? There's a shit ton of situations where this happens in this book. It's quite interesting. So it's very, very carefully written by Plato. What's very important to note that he writes dialogues, right? In case you don't know that, Plato writes dialogues. This also is a dialogue where the two main characters are Socrates and Hippias. Now, we'll get right into who is who and whatever, but it is still written by Plato. It's very hard to reconstruct how much real it is. By reading it, I mean, to be quite frank with you, I think it's very, very over-exaggerated. I don't think this dialogue ever happened. Maybe there was some exchange between Socrates and Hippias, but the way they talk, it just seems very unrealistic. Like, a guy like Hippias, the way he's described here, would even bother to stay at this issue this long. Even this one part where he wants to walk away from the conversation, I think that's the most real part in there. But there's a lot of things that's over-exaggerated. But what's not as important is not the legitimacy of this dialogue, it's the message you get from it, the lesson you learn. The core question of this dialogue, even though it doesn't begin right off the bat with it, we get into it soon, is what is beauty? It's very important to note that Plato differentiated universalities and individuals. It's this universal idea of beauty, is where his whole world, this dualism, the world of ideals, comes from. So he has this ideal of beauty. Socrates in this dialogue is asking, so what is beauty? But Hippias, he starts answering with individuals, participants. The whole way, like, Plato is mostly understood, and it's the most reasonable explanation, is that he proposes that there's this other world where there are these ideals, perfect state something. And one of these ideals is beauty. A beautiful girl and a beautiful boy and a beautiful painting, they all just participate on this ideal. This will be more understood deeper we go into Plato. I'm planning to do more of these. Let's start off with the dialogue. So, how do we start off? So Socrates, he's in his typical city in Athens. He's just chilling in the middle of wherever he is. We're not really told. And he welcomes Hippias. Now, he welcomes us very, very ironically. It's kind of ego play going on. I won't be reading everything in this book. Most likely, I will just try to reconstruct. So instead of Socrates just saying, hey, what's up, Hippias? He's more like, oh, you beautiful and wise Hippias. Which is very ironic. Now, why is that? Why is he picking this guy? This is very important. Because Hippias is one thing that we would call a sophist. Now, what a sophist was in the Athens back then was a guy that got paid literally for his wisdom. That is the simplest way to describe it. He was kind of this universal teacher. He was teaching kids of rich, very rich people. And he was teaching them all kinds of stuff. It's a very broad field. It's like saying, what's a philosopher? Well, it's not that simple to put a concrete definition on that. The whole point is, Socrates, he's this guy that, he's a lover of wisdom. That is the best way to describe what a philosopher is in terms of what Socrates is. So he's reaching wisdom. He wants to be the wisest of them all. So he goes and he sees Hippias and he's like, oh, you beautiful and wise Hippias. Like, you are supposed to be so wise that you get paid. You are the perfect partner to talk to about this issue I have. So from the dialogue, you can tell they have spoken before. He clearly knows who he is. That's why he approaches him. And in a lot of Plato's dialogues, that's very important to remember. Socrates is oftentimes a character. He's very idealized, very idealized. You can kind of see that like everything he says is written so perfectly and so fluently. Plato must have taken his time with this. And on the other hand, the sophists, they're made to look like idiots. Socrates, his whole critic is getting money with wisdom you don't have. Well, that's pretty fucking ironic, isn't it? So this whole setup, it's a trap. Right off the bat. So Socrates, he's like, oh, you wise Hippias, welcome to Athens, right? And so Hippias, he says that he has come from Lacedaemon, which would be Sparta. It's just a different name for Sparta back then. And right off the bat, they get into the conversation of getting money for wisdom. So Socrates, he kind of asks him, how is it possible that these hoi heptasophoi, which were the 7 wise of the Athens back then, well, one of these, you might have heard, is Thales, the guy that said that water is the beginning of everything. So Socrates asks Hippias, how is it possible that these guys, they didn't engage in political manners? Well, Hippias says that, well, these motherfuckers, they were weak and incompetent with their wisdom to do both. That means private manners and public manners. What's very important is that Hippias, he says he can do private wisdom, but also public wisdom. He can do political stuff, he can talk well, and he says that he was sent to Athens because they consider him the best in this, the best judge and the best talker. Oh, this is not a very important thing that they talk about, but we can scratch it a little. It's not the core theme, but it's kind of good to set the tone. So the whole problem Socrates has with sophists in general, and with Hippias being a part of them, is that they take money from teaching the wisdom they don't have. Teach the young, they're very influenceable. They take like significant amounts of money through their wisdom. It's literally what they specialize in. Now you can really tell in the dialogue that Socrates is being very, very careful with every single word Hippias says. And there's still this ego play going on, right? So Socrates, he doesn't start off dissing Hippias, at least he doesn't realize that. He says that Gorgias, this other sophist, also has a dialogue with Socrates written. It was this guy that made a lot of money when he came to Athens, into his city. And Hippias, he says, oh, you don't know anything about making a lot of money. The most money was made by me. I made 150 mints. I actually did some calculations according to historians, and this is definitely over-exaggerated by Plato, because according to that, Hippias here is claiming that he has stayed on Sicily, and he has made in a short time, which very tough to say what's a short time, let's say like 2-3 years, maybe even 5 years, he has apparently made over $1 million, which is very strange. Now, what's possible is the fact that Hippias is over-exaggerating here himself, so he needs to look at this best, which would then seem to us that he's written very narcissistically. He keeps bragging about this stuff. Socrates spots this, and every single time he starts off saying something, he's very careful. He never disses, like he never directly puts down Hippias. He keeps climbing into his ass and very carefully just asking him. It's what Socrates is doing in this dialogue throughout the way. Now this is just setting the ground for the big question, what beauty is. These things aren't that important to remember, to be quite honest with you, but it's good to know what's going on here, how the ground is set. So as we have said, Hippias, he says that he has earned the most in Sicily, but then we actually know that, well, it's literally the place where he's come from now, like a daemon, that is the place he goes to the most. And Socrates is like, how is it possible that you have made no money over there? Well, Hippias is like, I don't know. But like maybe they're too stupid. Socrates doesn't really say to him, well, maybe it's because you suck ass and maybe you're smart enough to not pay you. No, he keeps asking him. So he's very careful about this. He's like, Spartans, they want their sons, they want the best for their sons, and they have the money to pay you. Is it not true? And Hippias is like, well, yeah, that is true. So he kind of forces him into that end. He forces him to admit that Spartans have a lot of money, they want the best for their sons, and Hippias, he has to agree with that. What Hippias is doing wrongly in this dialogue the whole time is that he kind of agrees with everything Socrates is saying. The problem is he is saying the truth at the end of the day, but he's very careful. He sets premises up like this. Like there's this example that, okay, so Sicilians, they have a desire to become better. So Lacedaemonians don't have it? Then Hippias is like, no, they do have it as well. Okay, so he says that. And instead of Socrates downing what he has said, he goes with the premise. So he thinks with him. He's like, okay, so that's interesting. So they have it as well. He takes his words as absolute. Now Hippias, he keeps shifting the blame. There would never be fault at my side. It has to be them. Which once again is a very narcissistic trait over here. Socrates then asks him, well, is it possible that they don't have enough money to pay you? And Hippias is like, no, they do have enough of that. So Socrates goes along and he's like, okay, so it's your most visited place. You didn't get paid anything. How is it possible? They have the desire, they have the money, but you have made no money over there. So by this we learn that probably Hippias specializes in teaching the young. Can also be very immoral when you think about it. If he is teaching them things that doesn't really have wisdom in himself, which Socrates is proving over here that he doesn't, and it's very non-ethical. There's another great example where Socrates is asking, well, is it possible that they can raise their children better than you? Do you admit that? And of course Hippias is like, no, I do not. It is not possible. So you can see that this is setting a tone by Plato back then. Like they had this genuine enemy in the sophists. It's not about this dialogue specifically, it's about the whole message. The whole message is, they're idiots. Now, I think it wasn't that far from the truth. But in a way, to write a fake dialogue, to really paint someone this way, seems almost wrong to me. Not to say that this has to be completely fake. It might have happened, but it definitely wasn't like this specifically. It's still changed in some way at least. But then we go in more depth about Lacedaemon, which is Sparta, or which is more known as Sparta. Is just a different name for it, or historical name, I think. Now, although it's not the core theme of this dialogue, it's kind of good to know what they're talking about here. So in short, we got this whole issue of trying to figure out, well, how is it possible that they wouldn't want Hippias' wisdom? Why wouldn't they want that? Hippias, he calls himself the best. He has made the most money in Sicily. There was this other guy, was older, wiser, and Hippias, he clearly made more money than him. He made $1 million, over $1 million. Now, how is it possible in Sparta, where they want the best for their children, they have the money? How is it possible? Now, Hippias, he claims they're too conservative for that. He's like, they are too proud in their traditional upbringing, and then they suddenly arrive at this whole issue of making the argument that they actually disobey the law by not paying Hippias, which is a very ironic point. I will not go about depth about how they arrive at that. I think you should read it for yourself. But it's kind of funny how through Socratic questions, they arrive at this hilarious conclusion because the premises are false. But Socrates, he goes along with it. This is the whole point of this irony. I think Plato must have been a very funny guy when, like, thinking about some stuff. He himself, I think, could have been a little narcissistic by putting people down like this. But he just sees how hilarious it is when not paying attention in the dialogue. Really should pay attention. Like Hippias, he's not doing that. He just keeps agreeing or saying single words. He's like a woman that's not interested in texting you back. So they arrive at this hilarious conclusion that Spartans, they actually disobey the law by not paying Hippias. And they actually only want to listen to stories about heroes. That's what they pay them for. But that's not the reality. Reality is that they have public education and they don't really need or really even respect sophists. But it's funny that how Socrates, he leaves him in this kind of stubborn mindset. He doesn't really have the desire to take him out of it. And he's like, okay, now I can make you look more of an idiot. Now, this is where it starts. So we are talking about what Hippias is teaching in Sparta and what they're actually interested in. And then talks more about his teachings, right? So he thinks that he has a friend in Socrates. He doesn't really. And he suddenly mentions this upcoming talk he will have about beautiful things, about beautiful actions, about beautiful activities to which a young person should put his attention. Now Socrates, he hears this and he's like, oh, okay, now's my time to shine. So he comes up with this fake identity, which is very interesting to do it because now he can directly insult Hippias without him even knowing he is insulting him. And Socrates is like, oh, it's very interesting you're talking about this, because not so long ago, there was this one guy that asked me, well, how is it possible you, Socrates, know which things are beautiful and which are not beautiful? Can you tell me what beauty is? And Socrates, he puts himself down very carefully. He's like, oh, I was dumb, I didn't know, and how fortunate am I to meet one of you wise men, and I can finally learn what beauty is. So I can tell this guy what beauty is. So he comes up with fake identity, fake guy that asks him, what is beauty? Socrates, he says that, well, I didn't know. Can you help me, Hippias? Please. Is it guaranteed that this identity is fake? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's very probable. It's a very smart strategy in dialogue. And I mean, Socrates is written as an excellent talker. So Hippias, he falls for the trap. Like, oh, I can help you with my wisdom. I am the wisest of them all. And then, to a lot of the stuff that will come, Socrates, very often, he will not say he himself agrees with this. But he says that if we were to go to this guy by fake identity, let's call him Fi for the purpose of this video. So if we were to go to Fi, he would say, oh, you stupid Socrates, I'm gonna beat your ass for telling me that. So we started with two main premises. Socrates, he starts off this way of saying that, well, would you agree, Hippias, that all good things are made good by good? And would you then agree that all wise men are made wise with wisdom? And then would you agree, and he obviously agrees, that all beautiful things are made beautiful with beauty? Hippias says, of course, yes, with beauty. And the second very important premise is that, would you agree that beauty is something that is? And Hippias, well, he says, well, yeah, how else should it be? Socrates then says, well, so what is beauty? A very simple question. It's very important to pay attention to these two premises. This is where Hippias goes wrong, because he could have then said that, well, I wouldn't exactly say that beauty is something that is, because it's a relative thing. But it's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the universality, and literally Hippias agrees with these two premises. Now, whether or not that is true, whether or not beauty is something that is universally, and all things beautiful are made beautiful by beauty, so that would then support the ideal that there's this ideal of beauty, and all things participate more or less on it. That's how they're made beautiful, and it genuinely is something that is. What Hippias could have done, he could have not agreed with these premises, but he has, and now we have to go along with it for the rest of this dialogue. Quite interesting. Now, it's up on you whether you agree with that. It makes sense in Plato's teaching and in the philosophical conception of reality. If we were to look at it more psychologically, it can be explained very differently, and that's a whole other debate. For now, we'll go with these two premises, that all things beautiful are made beautiful by beauty, and it genuinely is something that is. So there's this something that is beauty. But what is it? Now, Hippias, well, he starts off saying, well, a beautiful girl is beauty. And immediately, he falls into the trap, because he doesn't name beauty he names something beautiful. It's not that wrong, because at least we get a bit closer to the truth with every single wrong assumption Hippias makes. He's very certain about this, and Hippias is like, Socrates is like, oh, what a great answer you have given. So if I go to this guy, if I go to Fi and give him this answer, he would be satisfied, right? And Hippias is like, of course, you are talking rightfully. It's very interesting how Plato has written, you are talking rightfully and not truthfully. The whole point of sophistic teaching is talking rightfully, not truthfully. That's the very difference. Socrates is trying to reach the truth. And he says that, well, if I go to this guy and tell him this, he would say, what is beauty itself as a condition for these things to be beautiful? And Socrates is like, well, I would go to him and say that a beautiful girl is something that through things are made beautiful, which literally doesn't make sense, right? So that's the first answer Hippias tries giving. And obviously, Socrates is like, well, this guy, if I would come to him, would then say, isn't also a beautiful horse something beautiful? How can we say that something else that's beautiful is not beauty, right? Not beautiful. So what answer? It's quite interesting how retarded the answer given by Hippias was, because first of all, he was not even answering what beauty is, but even if he was getting asked like what beautiful is, he literally just said what something beautiful is. He said a beautiful girl. A very circular definition given by Hippias, because what definition we get out of that is that, well, beautiful things are beautiful things. And okay, great. Thank you, man. Thanks for your teaching. Like, you should be paid the amounts of money you're getting paid with this amount of wisdom. You have saved us. Now I know what beautiful is. So Socrates, he names more examples. And they kind of realize that, okay, well, going nowhere, because there's a lot of these beautiful things. How is it possible they're all beautiful? So Socrates, he says that this guy will name a horse a lyra. Now, Hippias agrees to that. But then Socrates is like, oh, what about a beautiful cooking pot? Hippias is like, what? Is this guy stupid? Like, what do you mean a cooking pot? Not that beautiful. And Socrates is like, well, a very, very well made cooking pot that's smooth and perfectly round and beautifully made. Like, how can you say that is not beautiful? Hippias agrees, but he says that you need to set kind of a scale of beauty. You need to set a scale of looking at this cooking pot next to a beautiful horse and a beautiful girl and every other beautiful thing. Socrates is like, okay, well, that makes sense, because this one guy, Heraclitus, which is another philosopher, very ancient, very interesting and strange guy, he said that the most beautiful monkey is ugly compared to humans. So this is the sophistic relativity, but we cannot agree with this because we have already set the premise that beauty is something that is. We have not said that it is a relative thing. And the reason why this is not working is that a beautiful girl is a participant on beauty. Now, next up to this, like, even though we have the cooking pot compared to a girl, that's still not really answering what beauty is. It's just saying that beautiful things are relative to one another. That's even a bigger problem, because that's not universal beauty. Like, Socrates is looking for something universal. So Socrates says that, okay, so if I were to ask you in the beginning what is beautiful and ugly at the same time, well, this answer would be definitely right. You say a beautiful girl, well, that is beautiful compared to a horse, and ugly compared to a god. But that's not what I'm asking. And Hippias is like, okay, you want something universal? Well, gold is universal, because you put that onto everything and it makes it beautiful. This seems like an amazing answer, because that seems like a very universal thing. He then goes with this. Okay, he's like, okay, so gold, well, that seems pretty plausible. So but there was this one guy that made statues called Hippias. He made a beautiful statue. It was supposed to be the most beautiful. How is it possible he didn't make it gold, but he made it from ivory? And Hippias is like, okay, well, ivory, I think that's a beautiful thing as well. And Socrates is like, okay, so if ivory is a beautiful thing as well, which immediately breaks the answer by saying that gold is universally beautiful, because you can already tell that there's other things that are also beautiful. So it's not universal beauty, but Socrates goes deeper than that. He says that, okay, so why has he made the middle of the eyes of this statue from stone and not from ivory as well? And Hippias is like, oh, well, it was suitable. So we then go into a very interesting definition, and it's actually great. This is the first time we get a definition of beauty. Hippias is like, well, beauty is something suitable. Socrates is like, interesting. So if something is not beautiful, then it's not suitable. So Hippias agrees with that, and he's like, Socrates is like, okay, so we can say that ivory and gold, whenever they are suitable, they make things beautiful. But when they're not suitable, they make things ugly. So Hippias, he agrees with that. Socrates then asks, so if we were to make a ladle for this beautiful cooking pot we have talked about, would we make it golden or out of wood? And Hippias, well, he has to agree that it's more beautiful to make the wooden one. Because the golden one, it would just melt in the pot, right? So this completely breaks the idea that gold would be universally beautiful, and it goes back to relativism. But Socrates, he doesn't want that. He wants something beautiful that would always be shown as beautiful. Once again, he answering something that is sometimes beautiful and sometimes ugly. Hippias, he says that for every single man, it is the most beautiful, be rich, healthy, and honored by Hellenes, which I would assume are some kind of gods, and to live the long life and be able to make a beautiful funeral for his parents and die before their children dies, and have a beautiful funeral made by this man's children. So that is what Hippias' beautiful life is. So he says that it's to be rich, healthy, honored, and live to a long age where you outlive your children, but you don't outlive your parents. Makes a lot of sense, honestly. And Socrates is like, okay, well, great. If I were to tell this to Fi, he would laugh. Hippias is like, well, he would laugh to himself, because he is one to laugh at. Fool. Socrates is like, well, he would not only laugh, this guy would have a stick with him, he would hit me with it. Hippias is like, what the hell? He's shocked by that. And he even says that, oh, that would be unjustful. But Socrates is like, no, that would be very just. Reason for that being is that, well, if I would say I was asking about beauty as a universality, which is always beautiful. Tell me this, beautiful life. Well, that's not universal. It's not beautiful for everyone. And Hippias he's actually shocked by that. Like, well, for everyone, that would be beautiful. But Socrates is like, no. There was this one legend about Achilles, and he actually preferred a shorter life where he would then become famous, honored for years to come, over a longer life that would not be lived fully. So there was one story where Achilles actually went to war in preference because he would then be honored after his life. And one of the conditions Hippias was giving was that it's a long life. Well, that was clearly not universal. So we go back to the universal cause of beauty. And we go back to suitability. Remember, we talk about that. We never really cracked why it would be wrong. So, with this premise, saying that, well, this guy actually preferred a shorter life, Hippias is like, well, it was more suitable for him, which makes sense. Socrates, he says that, okay, so if we really think about this, we would then say, what we have figured out thus far, is that something suitable is beautiful, is beauty itself. Hippias, he says that, okay, sure, that makes sense. But Socrates is like, no, we should really think about this. So we're not wrong. And that's where philosophy starts. Now, finally, it seems like these two, they merge into one and they really philosophize and they really think about stuff. So Socrates then asks, so by beauty, do we mean something that comes to things and makes them beautiful, or makes them seem beautiful? Which one is it? And Hippias is like, well, beauty, it has to be that it makes things seem beautiful. When someone puts on beautiful clothes, well, he would seem beautiful even though he is a fool. So we kind of set up this premise that beauty is something that makes things seem beautiful. Socrates says that, okay, so if suitability appears to make things seem beautiful and doesn't make them beautiful, wouldn't suitability be some kind of an illusion? Because we were looking for something that makes things beautiful by which all things are beautiful. Because when you would say that big things are made big by overreaching, suitability cannot be that. Because by your words, Hippias, it only makes things seem beautiful, doesn't make them beautiful. But Hippias, he says that, well, no, you're wrong, Socrates. Suitability, it actually makes things beautiful, and it also makes them seem beautiful. So Socrates is like, okay, well, is it possible that things are beautiful and they don't seem beautiful when there is something that makes them seem beautiful? So he literally says that when something is beautiful, it must seem beautiful. When to it comes the maker of making it seem beautiful. Now, to deconstruct this point, basically Socrates is saying that, well, that something can be beautiful and doesn't have to seem beautiful to you. Very reasonable. And he's quite right in that. And Hippias is like, oh, well, that's not possible. Well, Socrates sets a great point of proving that it is possible. He's asking Hippias, well, is it possible? And it's very amazing how he never really tells him anything. He never really tells him the truth. He just keeps asking. So he asks Hippias, well, is it impossible that all beautiful things and actions are considered beautiful always, and everyone sees them as that? Or is it possible that people don't know about them? Well, Hippias, he obviously has to agree with the fact that, well, people don't know it about them. Because some things you can do, they don't really have to seem beautiful to you, but they can be beautiful to other people. So Socrates says that, well, if the suitability would make them beautiful, and they would also make them seem beautiful, it would then make sense to say that suitability is the cause making things seem beautiful. Well, that cannot be true. Because if it is the cause of making things seem beautiful, it would not be able to be the cause of making things be. And the other way around, it couldn't be the cause of making things seem beautiful, because if it was making things be beautiful, well, it can be the same. It cannot be both. The same cause cannot be causing, seeming, and being. Hippias, he has to agree with that. The fact that suitability, it only makes things seem beautiful. Socrates is like, fuck. Well, now we don't know. We're back at square one. Socrates is like, okay, let's not lose hope. This is where the funny part comes in. Like, Hippias is like, definitely, if I go back home and I would try to find out the solution, I would. No, he tries to leave the conversation, but Socrates is like, no, we're so close. We have to keep going. Well, let's work together. And he then proposes another definition of beauty. And then he says, okay, so let's say that something beautiful is something that's useful. Let's say that beautiful eyes are the ones with which we can see. They are useful. Now, Hippias, he just says, yes. You can tell he's irritated by this. But it's like he has a little interest in this conversation, but mostly it's a monologue by Socrates. It's a very interesting dialogue. You can see these two people are on a completely different wave. Socrates says that, okay, so our whole body we can consider beautiful, one for running, one for fighting, and also all animals. A beautiful horse, a beautiful cock, and a beautiful chicken or whatever. We call all these things the same word, beautiful, the way they're naturally made, because they are useful. And if something is not useful, well, we say it's ugly. It's possible, Hippias, of course. But then we can say that something beautiful is something useful, or not. He says that if something has power or the ability, competence to act, it then is useful. Something is not useful, it is not practical, it cannot be used, it doesn't have any ability, right? It doesn't specifically have to be usefulness, it can only be the ability. It has some kind of use. That's what makes things beautiful. So to be more exact, the Greek word used here is dynamis, which would then be capacity or ability. But if something has some kind of capacity, ability, it would then be beautiful. or beauty itself. If it doesn't have that, it would then be ugly. Hippias obviously agrees with this. This is actually very quickly disproved. How is it disproved? Well, first of all, Socrates, he says that, well, wisdom out of all things is the most beautiful, and oblivion is the most ugly. Hippias obviously he says that as lover of wisdom himself, even though he has a different definition of wisdom. But Socrates he says that, well, from a very young age, all people, they actually have the capacity to do something evil more than something good. They make a lot of mistakes. Therefore, it cannot be beauty. So it jumps into a different idea, saying that, okay, well, maybe it's not the ability itself, because we have the ability to do evil stuff and bad stuff. Maybe it is ophilimon. The Greek word here is ophilimon, which would then say beneficial in terms of practicality, morality, bodily, soul. There's a lot of terms in which something can be beneficial. So Socrates says that something, since the ability itself cannot be beauty because you have the ability to do evil stuff, it has to be the ability to do good, which would be something beneficial. So we say that beautiful things, like beautiful bodies, beautiful laws, wisdom, they're all beautiful because they are beneficial. Hippias obviously agrees with this. Then Socrates says, okay, so something beneficial is what makes something good. So Hippias, okay, sure, where are we going with this? Socrates goes along with this idea. He's like, what something makes, isn't it anything else in the cause? Well, obviously, Hippias agrees with this. And he says that, well, isn't beauty the cause of good? And then Socrates says, but a cause is something different than its effect. The cause of a cause cannot be a cause. So isn't cause making something be something? Now, this seems very confusing, but the point he's making is that, okay, so something beneficial makes stuff good. It's literally the definition of beneficial. Something is beneficial, it means that something is good. But if it is the cause of that, it's going to be making anything else. There has to be a clear line. There has to be a difference in what arrives from the cause and from the things that causes it. So if we say that beauty is the cause of good, if we were to say that beneficiality or something beneficial is beauty, which is the cause of good, we'd have to say that beauty is the cause of good. We would have to say that good comes to existence by the effect of beauty. That is because why? We reach for wisdom, because it's the way it seems, because the good of it is worth working for. So it would then seem that beauty is some kind of a father of good. It's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Socrates is like, okay, but wouldn't that mean that, like, cannot we say that father is not son and son is not father? Maybe it's obviously, yeah, sure. And then we can say that cause is not the effect, and the effect is not cause, just like father is not son. So Hippias is like, yeah, sure. And Socrates is like, oh my fucking god. That means that we cannot say that beauty is good, or good is beauty. It wouldn't make sense. The cause cannot equal the effect. The cause makes the effect. So we cannot say that beauty is beneficial or beneficiality or good, because beauty is the cause of good. So yeah, we can say that something beneficial and useful and having the ability to do something good is beautiful, but that wouldn't make sense. Cause cannot be the effect. And this is where Socrates is like, fuck, I don't know where to go now. So Socrates, he realizes, okay, so we're at a dead end now. This seems like I don't even know what to do. Then suddenly, Hippias, like, once again mentions, maybe if we were to give it some more time, I would go away and think about it. I would find what beauty is. Well, he clearly doesn't want to stay at this issue. He just wants to escape it, which so did I when reading this book. It was very difficult. I have to admit, when you go through this, your head starts hurting, like genuinely hurting. But we go on with this issue. And Socrates is like, what if, theoretically we were to say that beauty are giving us pleasures, but not all pleasures, but the ones given to us by hearing and vision. So that would be visual and auditory pleasures. These pleasures, this is how we view beautiful paintings and beautiful statues. They are a pleasure to our vision, and beautiful sounds are a pleasure, and also and beautiful music and beautiful speech and stories are the same. They're a pleasure to our hearing. Okay, when they say that beauty is a visual and auditory pleasure, that seems to make a little sense. But then Socrates, obviously Hippias agrees with it. We don't even have to say this anymore. He agrees with everything fucking Socrates says, right? So he's like, yeah, that seems like a great idea. But to be honest, I mean, it does seem like a great idea. Hippias is not very significant in this dialogue. He's just there to make fun of. Which is why I have said before that Socrates is very idealized here. Because this dialogue, even though it is about sophists, the only role of the sophist is to say that he has the wrong approach to wisdom. And mostly, it's all about Socrates. So, one thing to learn from this dialogue, and this may be a very controversial take, is that it is this kind of overrated in the manner that it's supposed to be a very thoughtful dialogue where you genuinely put away your ego and you learn, but it's not really a dialogue. Like, Plato had this conception of a philosophical message should be like a philosophical book. The ideal approach should be a dialogue. That's why he writes dialogues, right? It seems to make sense, but then when you really think about it, it's not really a fucking dialogue. Go and read the book for yourself, and you'll see that, like, Hippias, even though he is a character that is in this dialogue, he answers quite often. He doesn't really play much of a role in here. You can see that Socrates is even proposing himself. Like, it started off with Hippias proposing, oh, a beautiful girl. And now it's just Socrates proposing stuff. There seems to be kind of a lack of empathy or lack of care for Hippias. Like, yeah, it's great you're doing this, Socrates. Honestly, I'm happy, but bro, just leave this guy alone. He wants to go home. He doesn't want to discuss beauty. We have been discussing this for the past 30 minutes. But I do understand both parties. Now, Socrates directly insults Hippias is not thinking things through, like thinking that I know what I don't know. This is where the very known thing comes from. It's one of the two parts where Socrates says something about not knowing. This big misconception that Socrates has said that I know nothing. He has never fucking said that, first of all. There's no writings from Socrates directly. He has never written anything. But second of all, you can see in this dialogue specifically, he says that pretending or thinking that I know what I don't know. Very important. In case you are studying philosophy, don't tell your professor or whoever that Socrates has said that he knows nothing. He has not said that. He has just said that he knows that whatever he doesn't know, that he doesn't know it. I think he is sure in some stuff that he knows that he does know it. So he would then say, okay, so this FI would ask us, why have you chosen, Hippio and Socrates, why have you chosen out of all the pleasures only the ones caused by visual and auditory pleasures, like by vision and hearing? You have pleasure from eating, drinking, or love pleasures. Aren't those things beautiful? Do you not count them as pleasurable? Or are they different in something than hearing and seeing? So Hippias, he says, well, certainly all these things, they're also great pleasures. And Socrates is like, okay, so Fi is asking, why do we then only count as beautiful or as beauty these specific pleasures and not these other pleasures? They're not any less pleasurable. By that logic, shouldn't we say that if pleasures that are not caused by hearing or seeing are not beautiful? Hippias says yes. which fucking annoys me. Like, another annoying thing in this dialogue, see, that he's not a great dialogical partner, because, okay, so there's this one point where Socrates is like, hey, so can we say that other pleasures than auditory and visual pleasures are any more or less pleasurable? And Hippias is like, well, yeah, we cannot say that. They're just as pleasurable. And then Socrates is like, so can we call these other pleasures not beautiful? And Hippias is like, yeah. Like, no thinking out. So it's so annoying the way this is written, because you really get annoyed at Hippias throughout this dialogue. And then Socrates, okay, he arrives at this logic that goes against his seeking the universality. So we have this auditory and visual pleasures. Now, Socrates is like, okay, so theoretically, let's say that the visual pleasure is pleasurable through vision, and the auditory pleasure is pleasurable through hearing. Well, of course, yeah. So he arrives at the conclusion that all pleasures, they're differentiated by what they're pleasurable by. And that seems to make sense, but what's he getting at? Well, he says that, well, we must have chosen these two pleasures for something different. There must be something different with these two when we name them as beautiful. It cannot be the fact that visual pleasure is beautiful because it is pleasurable by vision, or it is viewed with vision, or the cause of beauty cannot be that auditory pleasure is perceived by hearing. Because those would be two different things. Because by that logic, if hearing would be the cause of beauty, it cannot be seeing as well. It cannot be two things. He's looking at a very strict, singular, universal definition. So what is the similarity that makes both of these things beautiful? We have concluded that a visual and auditory pleasure, yeah, they're both beautiful, but the cause is different. What is similar then? What is the same thing they have? This is the big question we're asking right now. There must be something they have together. And Socrates, he goes on this very strange logic, but it does make sense. He says that, okay, so they cannot both be beautiful, both together and separately. Hippias is like, well, they can, obviously. Socrates is like, okay, so if both of these pleasures together have something in them together, but not separately, wouldn't beauty be this thing? Hippias is like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? How is it possible that these things separately don't have something? Like, logically, if they have it together, they should have it separately. And Hippias is like, you fool. You will never find something that I don't have and you don't have, but we both together have it. Like, how is that making any sense? And Socrates is like, what? What do you mean, Hippias? Like, there are things that I don't have and you don't have, but we are both together. Socrates is very hard to follow over here. I really recommend reading really into depth. But in short, the argument he is making is that Hippias says, okay, well, if we are both together justful, then we each separately be justful. Or if you and me separately are unjust, then we both be like this. Hippias is like you're making no sense, Socrates. And he really is very counterintuitive, his thinking here. But the point is, Hippias doesn't really understand this very depth that Socrates is in. And the point he makes is that, in fact, it is possible for them both together to be something they are not separately. Because he says, well, you separately are one, I separately am one, but we together are two. Is it not it is literally not possible for you separately to be two, me separately to be two. Like, we can only be that together. It's a very interesting thought process, but it kind of goes a little off track here with this whole idea of something like proving the fact that, in fact, even though separately auditory and visual pleasure, they don't have to separately have something, but they can have it together, which can be this beauty. He says that, so we find out that pleasures caused by vision and hearing aren't beautiful by the cause, which they separately have, each individually, and both don't have together. Or both together have, each separately don't have. It has to be something that they have together, and they have each separately at the same time. Just like with this example, when he says that each of us is one, but we together are two, it cannot be that. It cannot be different. It's making the whole point that, okay, so I am one, you are one, but together we are two. When it comes to auditory pleasure, it's caused by hearing. That's something it has separately. Visual pleasure, it has separately the fact that it's caused by seeing. Together they don't have it. It has to be something they have together and they have separately at the same time. So it cannot be either hearing or seeing. It has to be something universal. So he goes back to the fact that, hey, well, what they have together and separately is the fact that they're pleasures. They're pleasurable. But by this logic, all the other pleasures would have to be beautiful as well. What's really annoying is the fact that Socrates proposes this idea that, I don't know why he picked, it would make some sense, we can discuss that, but it would make some sense that he would choose vision and hearing, but he just kind of picked that, and Hippias just agrees with it, and he's like, why is it not other pleasures? It's very annoying that he doesn't really have a counter partner arguing against him, which is there to further prove the fact that Hippias is not even a great talker. But to be quite honest, I understand that Plato is ironically digging at sophists, but I don't think he was very engaged in this conversation. Socrates then asks, okay, so how do we differentiate? What category is beauty in? Because you have said, Hippias, that if I am strong and you are strong, then we are both strong together. And if I am just and you are just, we're both just together. And if we are both two, well, then we are both each separately two. Which, default, like there's not a universality that you can both be something together and be it separately. Socrates says, well, if then, by this logic, I am beautiful and you are as well, and we are both together beautiful. And if then we are both beautiful, we are also each separately. To me, seems very illogical that we both together are beautiful and not each separately, or each separately are beautiful and not together. Do you agree? Hippias obviously agrees with this. Okay, so we can then say that beauty actually is in this category. There are some things that are not. When it comes to the justfulness, you can say that each separately, two individuals can be strong, separately and together. But when it comes to the number two, they can only be that together and not separately. But they figure out, okay, so beauty is something that can be separately and together at the same time. So Socrates tries to figure out what makes pleasures caused by vision and hearing together beautiful. And Socrates, he thinks that, okay, well, out of all the pleasures, all of these are the least harmful and the best, both together and separately. Hippias says, yeah, they truly are the best. Socrates, he's like, okay, so if I will say, so do you think that beauty is a beneficial pleasure? Hippias is like, yeah, that makes sense, but then Socrates says that, well, if I will say, well, what makes something good is the cause making something. That's different from the effect, from the result, which we have proven before. Good cannot be beauty, and beauty cannot be good. A very simple mathematical equation. If A is the cause of B, then therefore A cannot equal B. So therefore, if beneficial is making something good, it's the cause of it. It cannot equal the effect. It is making something good. It's making something beautiful. It's making beauty. It is the cause of beauty, but it cannot equal it. Hippias, he gets very mad, and he's like, well, this is just nitpicking. Oh my fucking god. Socrates, leave me alone. Like, what is the result of this? And you know what the result of this book is? There's no result. And that's the funniest of them all. So it's a very important... That's why it's called aporia. Because you then figure out, well, What is beauty? Like, I have no fucking idea. I thought there would be some conclusion to this. Apparently Plato, he will talk about this in these other dialogues. Well, what do you think? Write down in the comments, because I have no idea. This is a very hard book to get into deeply. It's not like the hardest. I really do recommend reading it for yourself. I think when I try to tell you the message of this book from my own words, it is not nearly as valuable. Socrates ends with saying the fact that you, Hippio, you do claim to be so wise, but you don't even know what beauty is. And he ends with saying, now I think I finally understand the saying that beautiful things are not easy. So, what do we learn from this? Well, we learned that we call something beautiful and we didn't even know what beauty is. I'm pretty sure it has been psychologically explained. If you know the answer, please write it down in the comments. It's a very difficult book to get into, but in case, this is a very simple summary to understand what this dialogue is about. And that's it. Subscribe and follow.